And for a lot of people, the 4% rule just isn't enough. We just can't save enough millions of dollars to provide the same kind of level of income that we're hoping for. And so when that's the case, then we ask our advisors, well, what can I do to improve my scenario? And they'll give us four options. They'll tell us we could save more money, which is always an option. We could take more risk, hoping to get more return. We could work longer, which is not necessarily a palatable option. And maybe our bodies don't let us do that at some point. And the fourth, which is the sad one, is people capitulate, just say, well, maybe I'll just have to live on less, right? And I call those the four frustrating options. But luckily, there's a fifth option. And the fifth option is one where we recombine, rethink about how retirement incomes are derived.
My guest here, Walter Young, the legend. I'm so excited to have him on the show. This is so cool. I've been a fan of his for a while. He autographed a book for me. He's the author of The Fifth Option. Walter, thanks so much for joining us, man.
It's my pleasure to be here. So excited.
Really cool. I was so excited to see you were speaking at the And Asset Mastermind. I loved your talk. And in fact, that mastermind is a lot about cash flow, life insurance, all kinds of things like that, tax diversification. But like you were talking my language. Like I'm a retirement guy, you're in the retirement space. And just everything you were saying was just hitting for home for me. So I was like, I'd love to bring you on and get you in front of our audience. So just for anybody who hasn't read the book yet, which by the way, I strongly encourage and recommend you read this. It is absolutely brilliant. What is the fifth option for people who don't know?
So the fifth option is a way of, at the highest level, way of integrating different financial vehicles to get the most potential for retirement. So when someone asks me what retirement income should be like, I'll tell them we want to have our retirement income using the fewest dollars, taking the least amount of risk with the least amount of taxes, and have the most predictability that it's going to work, right? That would be, we check all the boxes for retirement income. But unfortunately, traditional retirement planning operates traditionally around the 4% rule, meaning I could take out 4% of my asset base, and that should last 30 years. And for a lot of people, the 4% rule just isn't enough. We just can't save enough millions of dollars to provide the same kind of level of income that we're hoping for. And so when that's the case, then we ask our advisors, well, what can I do to improve my scenario? And they'll give us four options. They'll tell us we could save more money, which is always an option. We could take more risk, hoping to get more return. We could work longer, which is not necessarily a palatable option. And maybe our bodies don't let us do that at some point. And the fourth, which is the sad one, is people capitulate, just say, well, maybe I'll just have to live on less, right? And I call those the four frustrating options. But luckily, there's a fifth option. And the fifth option is one where we recombine, rethink about how retirement incomes are derived. And so that's what the premise of the book is all about.
That's absolutely incredible. So if people are planning for retirement today, let's say they're about 5 years away, they're getting close, they've saved some money in their 401k, they're maybe getting close to paying off their house. What are some of the key components and the principles in this book that you would share with them that they really need to know about ahead of time before they end up actually retiring?
Yeah, so you really need to have an exit strategy, right? You have to understand when I get to retirement, how will I derive the income that I need? And you have to really understand what vehicles or strategies do you have in place. And you want to understand what level of efficiency am I going to get from my asset base, right? You and I could each have $1 million, but if your $1 million gives you $60,000 a year and mine gives me 40, well, you win, right? We have the same asset base, but you just have a better way of being able to articulate the income that you might want. And so we have to understand that there's many different ways to create an income, but not all of them are equal. And so that's what I would start to think about as you get closer to retirement, is beginning to crystallize what is that income plan going to look like.
You have a chapter in here called the SPIA, and I love that chapter. And it was the whole book's just such a great read. But I saw a video recently by Dave Ramsey. And in the video, he was helping somebody to set up their retirement income. And he said, hey, look, if you make 12, you can easily take 10. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think anybody that has any academic credibility will not even give Dave Ramsey's financial planning a time of the day, quite frankly, right? We know what he's missing entirely is the sequence of return issues that happen, right? So the whole push behind the 4% rule was done by Bill Bengen back in the 90s, was to understand that we might average 12%. But that doesn't mean that we get 12% every year, right? The way I kind of use an analogy is if I have a bucket of 0-degree water and a bucket of 200-degree water, and I put a foot in each one of them, on average, I should be comfortable, but really I have two unhappy feet, right? And so the idea behind that is that if I earn 8 or 10%, that I may have positive numbers and negative numbers, big numbers and small numbers. And although they might average out over a 10 or 20-year period of being 8%, the sequence of what I earn makes all the difference. If I start with negatives out of the gate, I got a lot of pressure on me. If I start with positives out of the gate, I may never run out of money. And so the idea is that we have to decide what level of risk are we willing to take when it comes to sequence of returns. And the fifth option gives us opportunities to show how we can really minimize the sequence of return risk so that we can actually maximize the retirement income, but not at the falsity that Dave Ramsey's talking about, right? I don't think anybody's saying, first of all, you should be counting on a 12% return every year, because that means you're just pushing, 100% equity portfolios, and that could be that's a bumpy ride when you're older. But also that sequence of return risk is so critical. What if I get some negatives right out of the gate and I'm taking money out of my retirement accounts? Well, I'm exacerbating a loss with a withdrawal. And the problem is that the markets never recover fast enough to get me back to where I needed to be.
I love the way you explain things. It's so you take these big, complex economic and financial concepts and you break them down into like bite-sized pieces with anybody could really understand them, which is really what I love about your writing. But what I want to know from you is, can you walk us through maybe just a snapshot of the process that you use to take a client through the fifth option? How do you do this collaboration to get them to that place?
Well, we do it by a discovery process to start with, right? We want to understand the client's their entirety. What are their goals? What are their dreams? What are they hoping to accomplish? And then we get a little bit more, analytical with it and start to say, okay, we got to understand what your balance sheet looks like, how it's constructed, right? What are you investing in? And so we have to understand what kind of retirement accounts, what kind of brokerage accounts. Maybe you're in real estate, maybe you're in some alternatives. So we want to understand that that you're building this balance sheet. But we have to be careful, because a balance sheet is not income. And so a balance sheet only approach means that I'm trying to just save as many dollars as I can so that a 4% rule can work. That's the least efficient way of deriving income. I call a balance sheet only approach just a BS approach, right? When it comes to balance sheet, we have to understand that at some point we need to understand what are the income vehicles that we can begin to look forward to that are going to do a much better job of distribution than the balance sheet, right? Than just kind of traditional stocks and bonds. And so what we begin to do is begin to understand how to bring in the actuarial science world, which is fancy terms for insurance, that have either life insurance or annuities that do a much better job of distribution than the market does, right? In today's world, I can get an 8% distribution from an annuity guaranteed the rest of my life versus a 4% probability, and the 8% is guaranteed. Well, the 4% should be okay, right? It's usually a 95% chance. But the difference is I can use half the money to get the same income as I could from the market, which means I have half the money to do anything else. I could have philanthropy, I could give to my kids, or I could just double my lifestyle, right? So we have to understand that we can create that pension field that we once had that allowed a much better sense of predictability for retirement at much better distribution options than just the market.
I have made it my mission. Thank you for answering that, by the way. I've made it my mission to fight senior anxiety, scarcity, all the things that prevent people from living their fullest, richest life in retirement. And I'm really trying to help my clients stay in this abundance mindset. I have this philosophy that when you're working and cash flow is coming in, it's easy to be abundant, or easier. Right. When you retire, it's harder. What are things that you do for your clients to help them with that mindset?
Well, I think really the number one is understanding that income plan, right? And getting a sense for what's the probability of failure that they're okay with in their plan, which is a weird question to ask, right? But the reality is that we have to understand that their anxiety comes from the fact that they feel like there's something could go wrong. And so what we want to understand is, how do we begin to remove the biggest anxiety producing options in retirement? Running out of money, right? Being one, inflation being the other, taxes, healthcare. But the real risk that we run into in retirement, the true risk that we have to understand, is longevity risk. Because if I don't live a long time, then taxes and inflation and market volatility doesn't matter. But if I live a long time, they all matter, and they all matter in a very increasing way. And so we have to understand that we have to be able to handle that longevity risk first. And with that kind of predictability and predictability in our portfolio or our income plan, it begins to take away the rest of the anxieties. I'm not running out of money. In fact, I know exactly where my dollars are going to be. And I know that my dollars will increase with certain degrees over the course of time. I know I have extra money on top of that, which makes me feel very secure.
I'm so grateful to our friend Caleb for introducing us, Walter. I love your message. I love your mission. I love how you're serving people. I think you're doing this absolutely the right way. I love the book. If anybody wants to get a book, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Or would it be to go to the book, or would it be, what do you have for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so the book really easy on Amazon.com is
Okay.
the easiest way to get it. Any single purchase is always the best to go to Amazon.com. And people call me all the time, my cell phone, or email me. My cell phone's 206-683-3375. I'm very casual about it. If I'm available, I'll answer. If not, I'll call you back. Or you can reach out an email, which is walter@thefifthoption.com.
You can go to Amazon to get the book, and I highly encourage you to, but you're not getting my autographed copy. That's for me. So thanks so much for joining, Walter. Really appreciate having you on, and let's do this again.
My pleasure.